Donald Trump is sending the National Guard into D.C. to try to take care of its rampant crime problem, but those on the left and the media are claiming there is no rampant crime problem, that the homicide rate was down 33% last year. It's at historic lows. And guess what? Neither side is totally right here. You'll not be surprised to find out there is nuance, and let's get into the details and why I don't really think sending the National Guard in will solve the problem that does exist in D.C. So, it is true. D.C. crime is down from its peak in the 90s and even down from a couple of years ago at peak post-COVID. But anyone saying there's no problem is lying to you. Last year, D.C.'s murder rate was 27.3 per 100,000 residents, which that is higher than every other major metro area except for St. Louis, New Orleans, and Detroit. That is 7 times higher than New York. It's higher than Chicago. All these places we think have high crime rates. And yet the homicide rate was 7 times higher in D.C., our nation's capital, than New York City. That is a problem that needs to be solved, and we are not taking it seriously. And by the way, we say that Black Lives Matter. In fact, we painted it in gigantic block letters in the streets of DC, but in that very same city that we painted that on the street, 96% of shooting victims were Black. So most of the homicide victims are Black, and just because they're shot by other Black people, because the victim rate and the suspect rate were about the same, that doesn't mean that their lives don't matter. We should care about this. According to The Atlantic, 3.4 out of every 1,000 Black boys ages 15 to 24 in Washington die by homicide. That is 3.5 times higher than the national rate. That is more like our soldiers died in Afghanistan and Iraq. That's the rate. Those were war zones, and that if you are 15 to 24 and a Black male, you are more likely to die in D.C. than you were as a soldier in Iraq and Afghanistan. That is insane to me. So look, there is absolutely a crime problem in D.C. The National Institute of Criminal Justice Reform report in any given year that says about 500 people are responsible for 60 to 70% of all the gun violence in the city. These are people that we are aware of, we could arrest, we could prosecute, and that's really where the problem is. These are repeat offenders that we are letting out, we are not prosecuting, okay? That's really where you can make a difference. The National Guard being at the mall is not going to make a huge difference in this situation because most of the crime is happening in Ward 7 and Ward 8. That's where you have to get the resources. And it really doesn't matter if you arrest people if the prosecution does not put them in jail. The last year that we have full data for this is 2023 because most of the cases in 2024 have not been resolved yet. But in 2023, we prosecuted 1,473 total felony count sentence. If you notice, that trend line has been kind of going down since the early 2017s, but it shouldn't be because we had a rise in violent crime after COVID. And so those prosecution rates are way lower than they should be for the amount of crime that is being committed. Here's another chart that shows some of that. This is specifically just with gun charges. So the USAO outright declined to prosecute 33% of arrests for felony gun possession. These are not just like people that have a gun in their car and they shouldn't have it. These are people that are being found on the street with weapons. Sometimes they've modified those weapons to be automatic weapons like machine guns, and they're still getting by without any gun charges. Okay, 37% of the initially charged cases were later dropped without a conviction. 50% of the convictions that the U.S. Attorney's Office did win were for misdemeanors only. So that means that you're getting caught with a gun, which is a felony. We claim we take gun violence seriously. And yet, if you get caught with a gun in D.C., you are very much not likely, at least for the stats in 2023, only 21% of the time did you get a felony gun charge. 1 out of 5 times. So that means that people are getting arrested with guns, with clearly bad intentions, and we are just letting them walk back on the street. And this is a little different than most cities in the sense that D.C. is actually ran by the U.S. Attorney's Office. So Trump could actually put his thumb on the scale of the U.S. Attorney's Office much more than the National Guard, and I think it would actually help this because if you leave these people on the streets, they are going to continue to create violent crime problems. Carjackings are a huge problem in D.C. Most of those are created by teenagers, and teenagers do this because they know if they get arrested, they will just get off scot-free. They're only even finding 2% of the people that are doing these carjackings. So it's a really bad problem. We do have an understaffing problem with the police, and so Donald Trump is not wrong here. And by the way, he's within his rights to send the National Guard to D.C. It's not like states where you have to have a governor sign off because D.C. is a federal area. So when known violent offenders are not prosecuted or given misdemeanor plea deals, they are back on the street really quickly. And this cycle fuels the perception and the reality that crime has no serious consequences. Sending troops for like 30 days will not change any of this. Trump wants the headline. He wants the security theater. Once these people leave, the structural problem problems are going to remain in D.C. If we are serious about fixing D.C.'s crime problem, and we should be because the nation's capital should not be a top 5 murder capital of the country, we cannot just do security theater for headlines. We need consistent prosecution of violent offenders, and we need targeted interventions for the small group driving most of this gun violence. And we need a justice system that actually follows through on this. It's not just about police arresting them. The U.S. Attorney's Office has to prosecute people for violent crimes and gun crimes. We say we take violent crime seriously in this country, but we don't with our actions. When we look at the U.S. Attorney's Office prosecution rate, they are not taking gun violence seriously at all. For a deeper dive into prosecution rates and what's worked in other cities, check out this week's podcast where I talk more about it.